How's it going, guys? Cody, guys, back again, dropping yet another video. Rocking the ex-con code the other day again, as per. Well, I don't really use it that often, but I've had the windows open all day. It's a bit cool. Absolutely knackered. Stayed up to watch UFC 251. Gutted by the Masvidal and Usman fight. Boring. Usman had to do what he had to do to win, but I was hoping for Masvidal. 135 quid anyway, so it's all good. Anyway, this story, as you can see from the title below, is in The Guardian, link in the description. Thousands of high-risk offenders in the UK freed into homelessness. Now, like I said, this isn't some third world country with third world problems. It's a first world country with third world problems. I think we've got the fifth richest economy in the world, or we did before pre-coronavirus. I'm going to do the story, guys. I'm going to do my bit at the end, so stay with me for that. Very strong opinions on this as an ex-offender. Anyway, let's go through it. Thousands of high-risk offenders in the UK freed into homelessness. Report warns of reoffending risk as 3,713 ex-prisoners in England lack safe housing. Thousands of high-risk convicted criminals, including those classed as violent and sexual offenders, were being released from prison in England into homelessness, increasing the likelihood of their reoffending, inspectors warned. Her Majesty's Inspector of Probation, no, that should be Her Majesty's Inspector of Prisons, said in a report that it was particularly disturbed to find at least 3,713 people supervised by the National Probation Service, which is responsible for high-risk offenders, had left prison and become homeless from 2018 to 2019. And the National Probation Service isn't just responsible for high-risk offenders at all. Anyway, Ministry of Justice figures show 11,435 people were released from prison into homelessness in 2018 to 2019, and 4,742 homeless people started community sentences in the same period. The inspector said the widespread homelessness was jeopardising the rehabilitation of offenders. The Chief Inspector of Prisons, Justin Russell, said the case of the serial rapist John McCann highlighted the importance of appropriate housing for high-risk offenders. The probation service had been unable to find McCann a bed in an approved premises on 2 occasions, and he ended up in an unsuitable housing that did not facilitate close monitoring and management. Russell said many individuals are homeless when they enter prison, and even more when they leave. Individuals need a safe place to call home. It gives them a solid foundation on which to build crime-free lives. It is difficult for probation service to protect the public and support rehabilitation if individuals are not in stable accommodation. A stable address helps an individual resettle back into the community to find work, open a bank account, claim benefits, and access local services. Russell has called the Ministry of Justice and Minister of Housing, Communities and Local Government to develop a national cross-government strategy addressing the housing needs of offenders. In all, 116 offenders released from prison were studied for the inspection report on accommodation and support for adult offenders in the community and on release from prison in England. 12 months later, 17% were said to still be homeless, and a further 15% remained in unsettled accommodation. For former prisoners released to settled accommodation, the number of those recalled or resentenced to custody was almost half of those who did not have such accommodation upon release, the report said. Many offender-specific schemes have closed or merged with generic homelessness services, where higher-risk individuals, such as those with convictions for sexual offences or arson, were less likely to be accepted, the inspectors said. The report warns of many substantial barriers to obtaining settled accommodation for offenders. Her Majesty's Inspector of Prisons said that most offenders did not have priority on the housing register, and some were excluded because of previous behaviour, rent arrears, being classed as intentionally homeless, or being without a local connection, while some social housing providers excluded risky service users. Overwhelmingly, we heard from service users that homelessness is tough. It's mentally and physically draining, often coexisting with similarly draining issues such as substance misuse and mental health. We heard how some find it easier to be in prison than navigate housing services following release, the report says. The Shadow Justice Secretary David Lammy said, by failing to provide adequate housing, the government is setting up offenders to fail. It is inevitable that some released from prison will fall back into crime if they have no option but to live on the streets. This creates far more victims of crime, as well as a greater expense to the taxpayer, as they will end up back in prison. To break the cycle of re-offence for former prisoners, the government urgently needs to address the housing crisis, as well as reinvesting in proper publicly funded probation service. The inspectors visited probation services in Northamptonshire, Cleveland, London and Essex across both publicly and privately run providers. Obviously, the National Probation Service is going to be renationalised. Peter Dawson, director of the Prison Reform Trust, said, no amount of good work in prison will achieve rehabilitation if the basics of support after release are ignored. If the government is serious about both rehabilitation and public protection, it must take this opportunity to invest in coherent plans. Spending billions on new prisons but peanuts on accommodation for people they release is obviously futile. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said, having safe and secure places to live is a crucial factor in cutting reoffending, and the probation service works closely with councils to fulfil its duty to help prison leavers into stable accommodation. Since the review, we've also introduced new teams dedicated to finding housing, our increase in spaces in approved premises, and our £6.4 million pilot, part of the government's rough sleeping strategy, has helped hundreds of offenders stay off the streets. We are also reviewing our referral process to help prevent homelessness. That's the story, guys. So the thing is, right, what people need to remember is that, like it's stated in the story, right, there's a lot of people that go to prison homeless. A lot of the people that are homeless on the streets, a very high percentage, are suffering with mental health, addiction problems, substance misuse, so alcoholics, drug addicts, things like that. I've been homeless on 3 occasions, and yeah, prison. If you go to prison and you're living in a shop doorway smoking spice, and it's winter time and it's raining and you're freezing cold, and you're having to shoplift to feed your drug habit, or to steal alcohol because you're an alcoholic. And you're living in a shop door when it's winter and you're getting cold and flu symptoms, and you end up in prison. You get 3 meals a day, a roof over your head, and you can still get drugs on tap in prison if you can afford them. A lot of them don't. They get it on tick and they lie to the dealers because the body needs the drug, and then they end up getting battered, living a life on protection. It goes down that way. Prisons are welcome for those people where you're living on the streets. If you go to prison and you're living at home and you've got a missus and kids and you've got something to live for on the out, right? Prison's a massive punishment. And like I said, it's just one of those things. But when people are in prison, a lot of people, we do the whole macho thing, prison's easy, right? I've had some of my funniest times in prison. I've also contemplated suicide in prison. That's me being honest. I can do my prison, but I would be lying if I didn't hit rock bottom during my sentence. So it's one of them. So a lot of people, when they land in prison, they can't handle it. So what they do, the amount of mental health issues diagnosed or otherwise, and the family relationships might break down, personal relationships might break down. They might need to escape the reality of the surroundings. So a good way, well, not a good way, but an easy way for them to do that is to get off the face on drugs. Now, a lot of prisoners go to prison having never taken drugs and leave as addicts. I've seen it happen. I've also seen people go to prison on one drug and leave as a spice head or addicted to spice. So it goes on. Now, so say you go to prison and you lose your accommodation because not everyone's got a missus, a kids and a mortgage. Say you get a 2-year sentence, right? And you're living in a flat, you've got no support network, you end up losing your flat. Right, because obviously rent arrears. When you go to prison, any benefits stop, unless if you're smashing it and you're making good money, you can obviously pay your rent. But if you can't and you're just low level crime, you go to prison, you can lose your flat or your accommodation or your house. Right. because obviously your housing benefit stops from the moment you hit custody. They'll ask you, are you on benefits? If you tell them, yeah, your national insurance number, they contact the Department of Work and Pensions. That stops your ESA, your disability allowance, your job seekers. That then has a domino effect because your council find out that you're not entitled to housing benefit, council tax benefit. So every week, every month, your rent arrears go up, you lose your accommodation. You start to take drugs. You become a spice head. Now, you're coming up to release. They've got nowhere for you. You don't have to go into a bail hostel, right? There's nowhere for you. There's no approved premises for you. You've got no support network, right? You're a spice head. You leave in prison. The spice habit doesn't just think, oh, well, he's leaving prison, so I'll stay here. The spice habit follows him out the door. Right? He's got nowhere to live. How do you think he's going to feed that habit, whether it's spice, whether it's another illicit drugs? How is he going to feed that habit? When you leave prison, you were released with £46. I think that went up to £80 during the COVID pandemic. We're slowly coming out of that, so I don't know if the figure for the release grant is still £46 or if it's still at the higher for the pandemic. But you leave in prison on average with £46. Some prisoners have been released with tenths in the past. It's not a secret. Straight away, as soon as that prisoner leaves prison, they fall straight down the crack. They're set up to fail. Right? Like I said, it's just ridiculous. Probation, through the gate services, they're not what they should be. And they wonder why the system's broken and people reoffend. Now, if you leave prison with an addiction and your £46 gone and you can't get anywhere to stay, what's going to happen? Ding, ding, ding. Of course, you're going to have to steal to feed your habit. What happens if you leave prison with an alcohol addiction? You're going to have to steal, shoplift to feed your habit or steal alcohol. And people wonder why the system's broken. We're spending £2.5 billion on a couple of new prisons. We can't staff the prisons we've got. They haven't got decency in the prisons that we've currently got, 119 of them. And they're going to build more prisons. More prisons, more problems. Prison doesn't work. Prison creates far more problems for society than it ultimately solves. If you leave prison with nowhere to live, you're either going to have to steal to feed your addiction, alcohol or drugs, or simply to steal to feed yourself. You commit crime, you get caught, you're on license, you go straight back to prison. Like I said, it's just unbelievable, right? You can't give someone that's going to be on license for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, and say, right, well, here's a mobile phone, right? Because they're not going to be able to charge it, right? And they can't even give them a sustainable address so that they can go missing. Sex offenders, guys, it also states sex offenders. Now, imagine if you've got a paedophile that like I said, that leaves prison, right? And they haven't got a sustainable address or a suitable address or a secure accommodation, and they're homeless when they leave prison, right? That those people, because they're off the radar, really, haven't they? The police haven't got an address where they can go to and think, right, well, we'll smash this door in because he's going to be there. They fall through the cracks, right? Now, the last thing you want, like people doing a bit of shoplifting to feed their habit and stuff, right? That's one thing. But sex offenders on the loose with no address, right? That could reoffend, could reoffend because you can't rehabilitate a sex offender, and then could go to ground. And they might, and then because the police, because of the failings of the prison and how the system is and the Ministry of Justice, they leave prison, they're homeless, they've got no secure accommodation, they go on, they might sexually assault children, it might be one, and then they might go to ground, pop up, get another one. So like I said, it's putting other people at risk as well. And we wonder why the reoffending rates, I think reoffending costs the taxpayer on average £15 billion a year, right? Now, the system's broken, guys. The system's more broken than the people that are entering it, chewed up and spat out. When you go to, right, anyone that's watching this that's like, oh, Cody, we're for prisons, right? I ask you this. What is the aim of prison? If you think that punishment is prison should be about punishment, the punitive measure of prison is losing your liberty, right? Once we get over that, prison should be about re-engaging disenfranchised people, re-educating them, re-skilling them consistently and across the board. You can do courses and stuff, but everyone, right? And then when they leave, everyone should have somewhere to call home, I'm living in an ideal world, right? But knowing what reoffending cost the taxpayer, they should be investing that money to stop that. So yeah, the system's broken, guys. Like I said, and they're chewed up and they're spat out. Surely the aim of prison to those law-abiding people is so that the prisoner leaves prison in a better position than when he entered, so that he doesn't go back to crime. Surely that's the aim. Surely, right? But unfortunately, prison doesn't work. Like I said, family ties break down. You can lose your accommodation. You can pick up drug habits. Just mental health as well. Suicide's a real risk as well for many prisoners, not all, but many. And like I said, the prison, people ask me a lot, Cody, does prison work? Yes. At demoralising you, desensitizing you, dehumanising you, and makes you even more disenfranchised than when you enter the system. That creates monsters. Prison doesn't work. It's never worked. Prison, they like to stack vulnerable and dangerous and violent offenders, human warehouse them in the name of rehabilitation. Prison isn't about rehabilitation. For private prisons specifically, you've got public sector, you've got private sector. For me, prison is a very lucrative business. It's a business. Look at G4S, Serco, Sodexo, Justice Services. Getting fat and rich off family suffering, prisoner suffering, prison officers and prisoners' families as well. And then you can do courses in prison, and you can like, even the prisoners that want to be rehabilitated, they can do courses, they can be well behaved, they come to the end of the sentence, they've got nowhere to go. They fall through the cracks. If you've not got a solid foundation to work up from, it's inevitable you're going to go back to crime. And then, like I said, the Ministry of Justice, right, know this, but they're going to build more prisons at a cost of £2.4 billion to the taxpayer, on prisons that are going to rife with corruption, drugs, mental health, suicide attempts, self-harm, violence, attacks on officers, attacks on prisoners, prisoner-to-prisoner attacks from prisoners to prison officers attacking prisoners, chewing up more disenfranchised, desensitized, dehumanized individuals. More prisons equals more prisoners equals more problems. And all those members of the law-abiding people that think, oh, throw them up and lock away the bloody key. Remember this. 99% of prisoners, unless serving a whole life tariff, are going to be reintroduced into society at some point. So those law-abiding people might want to brutalise prisoners, give them bread and water, not let them have visits, right? Do you think that that's conducive to rehabilitation? No. Nor is it conducive nor does it act as a deterrent. Right? So brutalising prisoners, you do it at your own peril, because when they get out angry, chewed up and pissed off, and they go back to crime, let's hope it's not your family on your family's homes. If it's burglaries or violent attacks or carjackings, let's hope it's not your friends and family. Prison, we need to be smarter. It's not about softer on prisoners. It's about being smarter. And like I said, punishing prisoners and conditioning them doesn't do any, and you know what? It doesn't do anything for doesn't do anything for the prisoner, doesn't do anything for prisoners' families, doesn't do anything for prison officers, doesn't do anything for the taxpayer. And the thing is, it's the taxpayer and society that pay for how prisoners are treated. Like I said, if you treat prisoners humanely and decently, and when and the system's how it should be, where it works for people, it's not going to work for everyone because some people are beyond help. But before most offenders have been offenders, they've first been victims. The way that, if the system was the way it should be, I genuinely would believe that it would reduce reoffending. Not everyone, because like I said, there are lost causes in prison, a lot of them. There's also a lot of people in prison that they've got a lot of potential, they just need it directing. And what's the point in being good in prison to get through the gate and have nowhere to live? You're going to end up back in prison. And it can actually, where you might go to prison for the first time on a minor offence, you then lose your, you might lose your, like I said, you could lose your accommodation. That person leaves with a drug addiction, not all of them, but some of them do. Or alcoholics, they leave prison. That one-time offender that's now lost his gaff and there's no support network is now leaving prison homeless with a drug addiction. So you've made a misdemeanor offender potentially a lifelong offender. Like I said, guys, I feel strong and I'm passionate about this. People don't listen to people like me. I don't know anything. But I'm more informed than the Ministry of Justice. You've got people in power, in government, in the Ministry of Justice, Robert Buckland QC, Lucy Fraser, the prisons minister, highly educated, letters after the name and all this great stuff. They've done O levels, they've done master's degrees and all this stuff, right? In politics. Politics doesn't teach you how to reside and relate to people that you can't relate to. They know nothing of our world, we know nothing of theirs. Simple as that. When I watch Prime Minister's Question Time, normally takes place on a Wednesday, I look at that and I just see them all smug. I've never seen that many criminals, right, under the same roof since I was in prison. I'm going to leave you on that thought, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Link in the description. Let me know what you think. Cody out.